Here, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has introduced stricter measures, saying that everyone in the UK should avoid non-essential travel and contact with others. More than 1,500 people have tested positive for the virus in the UK, but scientists advising the government estimate that the actual number of cases could be between 35 and 50,000. Well, here's the Prime Minister explaining why the new measures are coming in now.
We are asking people to do something that is difficult and disruptive of their lives. And the right moment, as we've always said, is to do it when it is most effective, when we think it can make the biggest difference to slowing the spread of the disease, reducing the number of victims, reducing the number of fatalities.
Boris Johnson there giving us that update. Let's speak to Chris Mason, who's covering this from Westminster for us. Chris, the measures that the British Prime Minister has introduced, although stricter than what the UK has experienced thus far, nowhere near as strict as some European countries.
No, that's right. And I think what's been quite striking, Kasia, today from a British perspective is the government here really cranking up the timeline it had set out for potential measures and fast-forwarding measures that many people, a matter of just a couple of days ago, thought might be a couple of weeks away. So the big change here in the UK today is this idea that if anyone in your household demonstrates symptoms such as a temperature or a persistent cough, then all of you have to self-isolate for 2 weeks to give time for the person who is displaying the symptoms to work through the virus, if indeed that is what they have, and for anyone else with them who is likely to catch it from them to also demonstrate those symptoms and potentially see the virus through themselves. So that's a big change, as is the expectation that those with underlying health conditions, and the government's published a whole list of them online in the last couple of hours, all those over 70 should go for significant social distancing, perhaps not in all instances staying behind closed doors, but certainly keeping away from any unnecessary social contact. And when you step back from it, Kasia, the thing that really struck me today for the second time in just a couple of days is that I've just never seen a British Prime Minister in my lifetime, I'm 40 next month, say anything like the kind of thing we heard from Boris Johnson. And I think for anyone really in the UK context who wasn't around at the time of the Second World War, they would have never heard a British Prime Minister setting out those kind of measures for how they expect British people to respond.
And Chris, when it comes to these measures, there's a lot of conversation on social media as to why now. Suggestions that the team that is advising the government had done these modelling formats and had suggested that if they'd have stuck to their original methods, the situation could have been drastically worse.
The modelling was suggesting, and this is why there's been this stepping up, the modelling was suggesting if the government had continued with its existing plan, which was to try and resolve this over the summer by gradually ensuring that most people beyond the vulnerable ended up getting the virus and recovering from it, because that's the message again from the British government, that most people who get it will be fine and will recover. That frankly, if that had been pursued, there was a likely death toll in the region of 250,000. Now, instead, they hope, with measures that will keep lots of people at home, with the desire that lots of people, where they can, should work from home, even if they aren't showing any symptoms, that you can hugely drive down that number. But the word from the scientists is the problem with that is you're only postponing the point at which lots of people will get it. And of course, from a British perspective, as we head into the summer, if there is a huge amount of postponement, you could then get a second potential wave in the winter, when the health service is likely to be more exposed because of the additional demands put on it seasonally at that time of year. So a pretty stark set of messages from the scientists and from the British government here, and a real sense from people that yes, the rest of the world, lots of places elsewhere around the world were taking pretty drastic measures already. It now feels like the UK is as well, although schools, for the time being, the advice should still remain open.
Yes, important note on which to end. Chris, as always, thank you so much.